Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Are you feeling well and fresh? We are. We have been looking forward to this session. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining. So we've called this session SNOMED Implementation Support, Extension Management, and the Simplex Toolkit. Essentially, it's a session we really wanted to do to give us the opportunity to talk with you and you the opportunity to talk with us. So myself, Anna Hoyen.
Kai Keeley. And Alejandro Lopez Osorio.
So we formed the SNOMED CT implementation support team. And we will have prepared this session where we are going to give you an update on what we are doing in our team and to give you an insight on how you might want to get in contact with us and see if there's something we can do to support whatever implementation work you're doing, but also to show you some of the tools, demonstrators, and things that we provide that may help you in your whatever efforts you're doing. So now I try to, yeah, that is us. So the outline for today is that we will start with an implementation support update, showing you the various activities that we have going on. Then the majority of the session will be on Simplex, which is a new extension management service that will be provided. And we'll talk about the reason why Simplex is under development and the philosophy behind it, what features does it include, and we'll show you. So I know there's been a lot of talk about Simplex in the various sessions during the past few days, but today we'll actually show you what it looks like. And then we have at the end time to discuss if you have specific things you would like to ask us or topics you would like to discuss. Please feel free to just jump in with anything. But otherwise, we have some demonstration prepared for new features to our mapping tool, Snap to SNOMED, on some terminology binding demonstrators and a small utility. And also some work we're doing with FHIR questionnaires, and then a demonstration of the post-coordination demonstrator. So the result of the new guide to post-coordination that we released, was it earlier this year? April. Okay, so let's go into the support update. And we have divided it into these categories here. So in the team, we do all sorts of things. And I've been thinking a lot about that this week because we have talked about both at the e-learning advisory group and in the context session yesterday about what is implementation, who are doing implementations, who are they? And the fact is that it's a range of peoples, it's a range of roles, it's a range of organizational organizations involved with implementation. So that really reflects why we are doing such a variety of things in the implementation team, because we try to support each of the various types of people doing SNOMED CT implementations. So the first one is on individual support, and what we mean here is very broad, and you'll see that in a moment. We have also a bit of an update on the implementation guides, the work we are doing with the computable languages, some research and development. We could also have said playground, right? So where we are exploring new stuff and trying to be a bit innovative. Then we have an implementation support portal. We want to show you the new things there and some of the implementation support tooling. Okay, for the individual support, that differs from the more generalized education that we provide in the education team and on our e-learning platform, where we have generalized courses on at a foundation level for implementers, for authors. So in these courses, we try to provide the general principles and techniques that are important when you implement SNOMED. But the fact is that when you sit in a project, there's a lot of impediments to these general principles. So sometimes you need to to look at how you can fit these techniques and principles into your environment. And that's where we can provide some support, for example, helping you to generate the roadmap, or just providing some guidance on how to approach or reach a specific goal. One of the things that we often hear is about the setup and use of terminology servers. And we have Snowstorm at SNOMED International, so we have a good foundation for running sessions where we can show how to set up a terminology server, explain what it does and how you can work with it. So we have these developer days, and they have been going on for many years. Previously, they were facilitated by the technical team, but has now landed here in our team. And we have this site, which is called snomed.org/dev training. And there's a link to it in these slides that will be available. And here you can see we have divided it by countries, and you can go down here and see what are the recent developer training sessions that we have run. And we have done this year for Germany and Belgium, and they have been completely virtual. So we have found a good framework for how we can do these types of sessions virtually, where there's a lot of people in the other end that can actually set up Snowstorm and try to run requests and try to use SNOMED via the services that is provided by Snowstorm.
The great thing about having an open source terminology server is, a FHIR terminology server, is that we can, use it as a learning resource, get people set up. There's no sort of barrier to getting started and getting the training started with the FHIR API. And, we expect that a lot of people will outgrow the open source offerings, and that's okay. We're very open about that. But yeah, it's easy to get started.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for that, Kai. And I'm showing you this site so that if it's something you think that could be beneficial for our organization, our country, something like that, I would recommend that you take a look here, maybe look at the agendas and the outlines for the past few sessions, and then reach out to us if that's something that you would like to discuss. Just going back to the slides. Then, so a new thing that we have done this year was from a request from the Netherlands. They reach out to us, and they have been doing a lot of great implementations over the past many years. And they have systems, they have been recording data using SNOMED, but now they would really like to try to advance their use of all the data that has been captured. So they were keen on trying to expand the national or the knowledge within their stakeholders on how to start maybe doing some more analytics or more use of the expression constraint language within their implementations. So we formed this together with the National Release Center and Digital Health Australia or New Zealand. We arranged these 3 web series, so a set of sessions focused on advancing implementation and looking at how you can use ECL, how you can do analytics, and how you can apply a terminology server. So that was the 3 sessions that we agreed that would be good to have like that, a common reference point for New Zealand by these sessions. And the SNOMED International Communications team were excellent in setting up this platform or this site here. And you will maybe recognize this because it's the same events platform as we're using for the Expo and the business meetings. So this is like the site where those people attending these sessions could go in and look at the outline and the topics for each of the session. They could enter the sessions, and they could also watch the recordings afterwards. So that was very successful, and it's also something that, and it's a great format. Again, it's virtual, but it gives like a sense of still that we are together on this, and we work together, both SNOMED International with some national organizations, and we bring in all these stakeholders from the country. So that's again something that we can facilitate, and please reach out to us if it's something you find would be useful for you. Then we have we called it implementation consultation. And this is whoever have some implementation project. So I talked a bit about that earlier. If you're a national release center, if you're a vendor, if you are a local implementation project, and you need to discuss topics that are of interest for your project, then we are there, and you can reach out to us at implementation@snome.org, and we are happy to meet with you to discuss your questions. And one of the specific things with this implementation consultation is actually the work we've been doing with Bomni. So I'll leave it to you, Kai, to talk about Bomni.
Yeah, next slide. That's good. Thank you. So we had some direction from the General Assembly that, you know, the organization could do something to lower the barrier of adoption to, you know, low resource or digitally maturing countries or areas. So Nick Agahos, you know, tried to find a vendor who was already, you know, very successful in these settings. And he found the Bomni Coalition, who have an EMR sort of suite. You know, there's an EHR component driven by OpenMRS, and there's several other components, you know, for billing and imaging. So we found that, you know, this was going to be a good partnership, and we could try and, you know, do a good SNOMED CT implementation and demonstrate some of the, you know, possible benefits of adopting SNOMED CT, both as, you know, a demonstration for others. Obviously, you know, people could, you know, benefit immediately from using the Bomni software itself. So we had a year of collaboration meetings, starting off with the planning and the architecture, and then going on to, you know, weekly meetings and hands-on, you know, software development, some pairing. It was very involved. I guess I jumped at this opportunity because, you know, it's a real opportunity to get experience bringing all these, you know, high-value implementation ideas with SNOMED CT out of theory and into practice. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So the innovation and learning with this partnership, when we speak to vendors, there's often quite a lot of resistance, or, you know, they think integrating SNOMED is going to be, you know, a really huge job. And, you know, EHR systems are often already very tightly coupled to the way they deal with terminology. So we came up with an architecture for this project, which is kind of a light coupling between the FHIR terminology server and the existing concept dictionary that they already had in Bomni. I think it's, you know, worked really well. We've also added a clinical decision support service, which uses the HL7 CDS hook standard. So again, you know, it's good, clean architecture with loose coupling. That's a reusable component, I think, the CDS service that could be used in other projects. So it's a nice outcome of this project. The third, you know, innovative thing that we've done here is there was a real requirement in Bomni to enable settings where the connectivity is very low and they don't have a lot of machine power. And we wanted to still allow them to use FHIR terminology services, but that really wasn't possible, you know, without a big machine or a good internet connection. So we've created this Snowstorm Lite component, and it requires very little memory, and, you know, you can run it on your local machine. So that's an enabler. There's various features that we delivered here. There's going to be a demo of them available tomorrow and Friday from the SNOMED International booth. But there's the, you know, the usual high-level things: constrained data entry. So there's good terminology binding and several CDS features, you know, all oriented around medications and drugs. So we've got drug condition contraindications, drug-drug interactions, and drug dose warnings. We've also got an automatic report with the ICD-10 reporting, so that we can, people can follow the principle of code once, reuse many times. If they code in SNOMED CT, they can obviously, the system can leverage the SNOMED to ICD-10 map. And 10% of those rules require extra information about the patient, like the sex or the age. So those have all been implemented in this report. Finally, there's a bulk file export for the patient data, which is anonymized, and we've tested, an integration which is distant to our data analytics demonstrator tool.
Yeah, so we encourage you to come up to the booth either Thursday or Friday and look at how BAMNI looks. And we can show you some of these features that Kai was just presenting here. So the next part of the update is on the implementation guides. So we spoke about that earlier this week as well, but a year ago, I think we agreed together with Ian Green and Jane Miller, also from SNOMED International, to create a common way of creating SNOMED CT implementation guides. And yet again, we had the discussion about who is an implementation guide for. And of course, it's important that there is a strong clinical focus. So when you implement SNOMED CT within a certain clinical domain, why can SNOMED CT contribute to better data and better care within that clinical domain? So that was one of the strong requirements. And on the other side, well, an implementation guide is also, but how do we get SNOMED CT into those systems where we are documenting clinical data for this clinical domain? So that is a very technical focus. What are the services required? What is the architecture? What are the models that we should use? So an implementation guide should span all of this. So we have created this general structure here. It includes like a standard introduction. What is the scope of this document? Who is it for? What does it consist of? And when will it be updated? So all of that basic stuff. But then it starts out with the clinical use case. So focus on, if you implement SNOMED CT within this domain, what can be gained? And what is it for? Then we dive into what areas of the SNOMED CT content is relevant within this domain, and talk about maybe the modeling, if there's a use case, if it focuses on how you can query data and retrieve data, maybe looking at the concept model for this domain to see what are the types of queries you could do. So simply having a chapter focusing on what is the SNOMED content applicable to this field or domain. In the next chapter, we talk about the modeling of structured data within this field, if that's what the scope of the document is, or what are the information models that apply to this domain. And finally, we have a chapter where we present the technical implementation considerations and principles. And it all, of course, depends on, again, the models that we have spoken about in chapter 4. So we should have this structure that can be applied to different domains, so that when users of SNOMED come in and read an implementation guide, they are not as surprised about what to find there. They know that we will cover each of these various topics in an implementation guide. One thing that we support, it's often the clinical reference groups that are like the driver for these the guides. Maybe they have produced a reference set, maybe they have been discussing in the clinical reference group implementation matters, and then they are like the pen leader in these guides. But in the implementation team, we then try to also supplement these guides with a demonstrator. So aside from having all that textual explanation of how you implement SNOMED in this field, we will try to also have like a URL with a small utility where you can look at, okay, this is how it would look in practice. You have seen our user interface demonstrator probably in some sessions in the past few years, but a similar thing for these guides, we will have like a user interface, and Alejandro is going to talk a bit about that.
You can go to the next section. So yeah, the idea of these demonstrators is to bridge the gap between the written text, some knowledge about that usually has a list of concepts and some business logic explaining the text, to a real world application. We realize that the final benefit is obtained by a quality implementation with a nice user experience, and when everything is presented to the user in a friendly way and everything has the right coverage. So I just stop sharing. So I will share the screen to show you one example of that. The first one we released was the allergy and intolerance, the demonstrator for the allergy and intolerance implementation guide, which was the first guide to be adapted to the new template. And working with the demonstrator was even very useful for the CRG because they were seeing what they were writing, realize it on the screen, and they were able to interact with the screen and enter content and think about all the different considerations. So it was really useful to develop the demonstrator at the same time we were developing the guide. And and also simplifies the access to the guide because it summarizes all the important knowledge pieces in a very fast way. So the guide is linked here in this note, but basically the guide proposes that there are two ways to record, for example, allergy content. Yes, you can either use the problem list or you can use a detailed allergy form list to record the data. So when you use the problem list, for example, this is a typical problem list you can use. You can search for diabetes mellitus and add the problem, and this is just the problem list. And in the same problem list, maybe you can add the allergies. So if you do like allergy to aspirin and you add it, this is demonstrating how you can highlight the allergies in your problem list so they are more visible for the user, and how you can create a small list of substances that the patient is allergic to by extracting the substance from the concept. So this is how it will look to use the simplified approach, which is just capturing allergies in the problem list. But there's also a different approach, which is to have a special information model piece to capture allergies. And the guide has selected the fire resource allergy intolerance as the way to structure the allergy information. So based on the guide and based on all the terminology bindings that are describing the guide, we can create a screen like this. On the left, we have something that the doctor will see. And on the right, we have the interoperability output. We have the fire resource that is created based on the doctor selections. So for example, I'm creating an allergy record. I can say the same thing as before, allergy to aspirin. But in this case, I will capture more information. Some information can be captured automatically. You see how the fields were populated. But the system can automatically detect that the allergy to aspirin is a hypersensitivity disposition type, because you can look into the hierarchy and see that it's a descendant of the concept hypersensitivity disposition. It also, you get the substance like before, and the substance is aspirin. You also get a category. If the allergy was instead the allergy to cat dander or to soy, it will be a food allergy instead of a medication allergy. And that's detected also according to the hierarchy. But also using a richer information model allows you to capture more information. And this is how the CRG designed this. So you can say that the clinical status is active, or maybe it's inactive or resolved after some desensitization treatment. Also, you can say the verification, this is something that is presumed, or this is confirmed, or we have refuted this later. You can have like a bit of a workflow or a life cycle for the allergy that can change time. And every time you change something, you can see how this is changed on the right. On the right, you're creating the information model representation in HL7 file. This is what you will share with someone else in an IPS or an interoperability framework. And also, this model allows you to explain the reaction. Let's say what I get when I take aspirin is an urticaria. So we can do something like this. This is an urticaria, and the reaction severity is a moderate urticaria, and the exposure route for the aspirin was oral route. And it's much more simple to see this live than to go and read all the pages of the document explaining all the interactions of these fields, all the importance of the properties and everything. Of course, you need to go and read the document later in order to reproduce this in your system. But this is an open source tool. So if you're working in a hospital and you have an EHR developer or a provider or a vendor, and you want him to explain what you want, it's much more simple to show him the screen and then send him to read the document than to just explain the document in theory. And everything is open source, so you can say everything you see in this screen is completely open source and it's available here. So the developer can go into this code and can see how we do it. He can read the code and see what all the operations we make. He can see all the transactions we make with the FHIR terminology server in order to populate these fields and everything. So we think that this is an interesting model to always accompany the release the implementation guide with a demonstrator that puts the guide in practice.
I love these demos that you produce, Alejandro. It's learning by doing. It really captures people's attention, and yeah, it's nice to support the guides, make them more interactive. I thought you were going to keep screen sharing, but one of you could, because I've only got one slide here. Continuing on the theme of our implementation update, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we're doing with computable languages. I guess there's 3 areas. Great, thank you. In computable languages that the implementation team are supporting. Anne mentioned earlier the post coordination. Now, we produced a post coordination guide. I think it was in April, wasn't it? We've been working for a long time. Yeah, at least a year with the computable languages group, working group. And yeah, I think we've made significant progress in the guidance around post coordination. It's not complete. We've still got a long way to go, and we started yesterday, trying to finish off some of the outstanding things or starting to approach them. But I guess it's the guide is there for community feedback and for trial use. And it's supported by the reference implementation in SNOMED that allows you to create a FHIR code system supplement and to insert expressions and run ECL on them. The big missing piece at the moment is around the maintenance of expressions and being able to update to a new version of, a new edition. So there's definitely a gap. The other area is ECL, the expression constraint language, which is really the SNOMED query language. We've got new features coming up to support alternate identifiers, which are really to support the LOINC extension and enable the use of LOINC codes in ECL, and also the top and bottom operators. The bottom operator, the bottom operator is, I think, the most interesting one, because it helps when converting a patient record that's used very detailed coding into a patient summary, when you want to use codes that might be in the IPS, for example. So that's definitely useful. The other thing that the computable languages group have started focusing on as a theme is to try and spread the use of ECL. And we've got a few techniques, but one of them is to come up with a profile of ECL, which is less, trying to identify the high value parts of ECL, the things that you should learn first, the things that you should pay attention to, because we noticed that the ECL specification has actually become very large. And a lot of it is, it's not the things that you commonly use. So this is a way to focus people. It also, the ECL light profile also helps tooling vendors if they want to add ECL into their tooling, or if there's a new terminology server, that it's a reduced set of things to implement, and it is the high value stuff. The next area is research and development. As you said, the playground. I've been doing some data science work with Barts Health in the UK. They've got some large data sets, and some of those data sets have come not from clinical coders, but from NLP processes. And they've got a large number of SNOMED CT codes in their data, and they're finding that sometimes it's difficult to analyze. Unless you really know the specific questions that you're trying to ask of the data, if you know that, you can use ECL. If you don't know that, and you're just trying to find patterns and sort of do data explanation, then you need a different approach. So we're trying to explore those using graph structures. Yeah, and that's going well. There's a presentation from Sophie from Barts Health tomorrow about that in the afternoon, I think.
We also, with all this ChatGPT fashion or trend that we see that everyone is trying to, well, we are all using ChatGPT in one way or the other, and we are also trying to see how it can help us with SNOMED. So we also researched these and different use cases for using large language models and generative AI for SNOMED. And yes, we explored how to use ChatGPT for coding natural language clinical phrases, for example. And of course, it's not something that can be used as it is. You cannot ask ChatGPT in the web page to code a clinical phrase effectively. But we designed using the API, which is using the mechanism behind ChatGPT, we created AI chains, which are processes that separate the complex tasks of coding natural language into smaller steps. And then we can use the language model for data extraction, for validation, for scoring. But we use the FHIR terminology server in the middle to capture the real SNOMED codes and things like that. So we explore different things. And we are presenting an e-poster that you can see in the Expo later in the week. That is an interesting example of how you can create using Python, which is a simple coding language that most people use in data analytics, an AI chain that will effectively capture codes for free text clinical phrases. And this was really interesting. We also try to use the generative models for some SNOMED specific use cases, like showing the model, the definition of a concept, the expression with all the attributes and all the different properties of the concept, and then asking the model to generate an FSN, a fully specified name. And this is working really effectively for some hierarchies like medicinal products or procedures that are very well described in the model. And it's a very nice way. You can ask the model to generate a long term or a short and concise term, and it's really effective for text generation. Also, we found that an interesting use case that is using the model as an interface with patients to say we have very technical terms in SNOMED that sometimes are not appropriate to show to a patient, for example, in a patient record or some information that the patient is accessing. And using the language model to translate from the medical technical language to a more colloquial language for patients, and we found also it was really interesting and useful use case. So we are still exploring things because people come to us with questions, and it's always interesting to be able to provide some guidance. And the other thing we are using is we found that some members and also the Cancer Synoptic Reporting Group, they were going through the same challenges. And the challenges are when we're trying to explain how to implement SNOMED in some particular use cases, those use cases consist on questions and answers. And previously, we were creating reference sets for each one of the answer sets, the list of options for each answer. And now we are going one step further. We're trying to help members, and also we're doing that ourselves in the Cancer Synoptic Project Group project, that is to use FHIR questionnaires. And FHIR questionnaires is in a standard way to model answers and responses and options for the answers. That also allows us to capture some logic between the questions, some conditional logic. So it's a very interesting way to see how we can use open source available tooling like the National Library of Medicine FHIR questionnaire editor, for example, to create questionnaires, to assign the responses to each question. And instead of releasing 30 ref sets, we just release one questionnaire that contains the options for each question there. And that questionnaire can be versioned and things like that. And we will show you later a validator that we developed for this kind of questionnaires.
It's also because we get so many requests from countries that have a strong focus on registries, right? So stay tuned for these for the demo of these questionnaires, because those of you who are looking into doing registers with SNOMED, this is definitely a feasible approach. So I'll share my screen again. Okay, so when we launched the implementation team here at SNOMED International, we also launched this implementation support portal, which is our website where we provide access to the information that is accessible around SNOMED CT implementations. So the site is implementation.snomed.org, and this is a good reference point for you. But since it was launched, we have made some additions, and that's what I want to tell you about. The new translation area and a place where you can access the demonstrators. So through this session, you'll see a range of demonstrators, but we also have a place where you can actually find them all. So this is the implementation support portal. One of the things that we have really, have come to our attention. We've always known that in order to make SNOMED CT applicable in countries that don't speak English or don't use English to document in clinical information systems, well, translations are important. They are essential. And we have always provided the opportunity to do translations, but that process can be a quite comprehensive process, and it involves many people. It takes a long time. It costs a lot of money. And when we have, I don't know if we are now almost 50 members. We are 48 members, and a range of these members look into doing translations of SNOMED CT. So we really find that it's important that we have a place where they can get an easy information about how to approach this and how to engage with other countries that are doing translations, understand what are the options they have for tooling and for the processes, and what are the key principles for doing translations. So we are looking into how we at SNOMED International can enhance the support that we give to organizations doing translations. But as a first step, we have created this part of the portal where members have, or anyone have easy access to all this information. So a place where they get introduced to the principles behind the translation, access to the documents that we have, our translation policy, and who to contact if they want to hear about any type of more high-level support for this. The tooling, translation tooling, that is specifically an area where we would like to see some enhancements too in the future. We can't say specifically what that is going to look like, but hopefully there will be something there. Member translations, and here I would very much like to thank everyone who has contributed to the member translation space, but there is a range of countries who have already done translations, partly or more complete translations. So if you are a new member and you want to learn from what others have done, it's always good to know who to reach out to. So here you can get an overview of the countries who have performed translations. You can read a bit about what language, the scope of their translation, how much they have translation, what description types they have translated, and so forth. And there's a way that you can get access to their website and to contact information. So thank you. We did a survey earlier this year, and people was super good at responding to this and providing us with the information for this. Also, the translation user group. We have a very active translation user group that meets every second week to discuss issues related to translations, and they learn from each other and discuss difficult things that anyone doing SNOMED CT translations face, and discuss what approaches there are for mitigating these. And they also, if there's issue with SNOMED CT, there's processes for actually bringing in SNOMED International to see if there's something that we need to update within the terminology. So this is really where it's also a part of the quality assurance of the terminology, that we have these very active groups that works on the details of SNOMED. And this group will have been contributing tremendously to the development of this type or this site, and also to the translation guidance we have here. Let me just go in here. So we have a detailed guide on the guidelines for translation. We have on the process, the workflow, how to manage a translation, how to ensure the quality, and then also how you evaluate the quality of your translation. So there are some different documents there. So that was about translations. Under services, you can read about the various services that we in the SNOMED implementation support team provide, but also documents and other the user groups and tools. And down here at the bottom, you see a link to demonstrators. I spoke about the UI demonstrator, which you may have seen before, but you can access it here. We have a map demonstrator that shows, that demonstrates the map between SNOMED and ICD-10, and also the allergy demonstrator that Alejandro showed, the terminology binding, and the post-coordination demonstrator. And we will show these after our talk about the Simplex. So this is also just to remind you that this site is here, implementation.snomed.org. You can also access it from our the organization's website. It's one of the prominent links on the front page. Yeah. So I have to remind myself now what the next thing is. Tooling. So here. So this, I believe this is the last part of the activity update. So as you can hear, we've been around a few things, but the last thing here is about implementation support tooling. I can't remember when Snap to SNOMED was first launched, but maybe it's a year and a half ago, something like that, where one of the first thing that was acknowledged within this team was that implementation is often about the migration from local codes to SNOMED, and that transition, how do we manage that? So it requires some kind of mapping from your local codes to SNOMED CT and a specific version of SNOMED CT. And there was no available tool at that time to do that. And then we had Snap to SNOMED developed, where you can simply import a local TXT file or Excel or CSV file that has a code and a term from your local code system, and you import that to the system, and this tool allows you to then search for concepts in SNOMED CT and map that, and you can export that release file, or not release file, you can export that map file. And there's been a translation user group or mapping user group involved with this, and one of the features, there were some features that was requested, and we had a discussion about what we can do to support that, and we decided on specific features, and we'll show them later, but such as having dual mappers, dual blinding mapping, and support for inactivations and stuff. So there's a new version of Snap to SNOMED coming up. It's not deployed yet, but we have a version that we can show you today. So just to give you a heads up on the new features that are coming, we are quite excited about this. Then terminology binding is also one of the things that are essential to make SNOMED CT work in a system, is that when you have maybe if it's a user interface, that you ensure that within this data entry field, it's only these SNOMED CT concepts that you can enter. Or if you have a communication or messaging model, that you ensure that in this data element, these are the types of codes that you would expect to see there. So the binding between SNOMED CT and the information model is essential. But it's also something that implementers, we have seen that in the implementation course, struggle with. how is it that we specify these bindings and how do we actually do it? So one thing is to understand at a conceptual level, okay, I understand that I have to constrain, but how do I do it in practice? So we have developed this terminology binding editor where you can actually sit down and see how you can create a binding, and you can use a terminology server to constrain in this demonstrated data entry fields. And we will also show you that later. Kai already told about Snowstorm Lite that was developed. So that was in the context of Barmni, where we have this lightweight version of Snowstorm supporting the fire terminology services, where you can have a terminology server in your system without requiring too much memory or internet access.
I've got to say, it sounds too good to be true. It does have a lot of restrictions. You can only have one version of SNOMED CT. It's read only at the moment. There's a lot of restrictions, but it fits for the Barmni use case.
Yeah, and although you would say in the perfect solution, you would have access to the full history, you would all of this, but if you think about implementations that you are involved with, you may see that the minimal features that are provided by Snowstorm Lite is probably sufficient to meet 50% of your needs, or at least to get started.
The biggest gap is not supporting other code systems. You know, you always need LOINC or ICD or something. You have the maps, but yeah,
it depends on the implementation. Yeah. The last thing on the implementation support tooling, I'll not talk too much about now because we have a whole series of slides on Simplex, but that's the latest thing in our suite of tools that could support implementers in actually starting to use SNOMED, and that's the Simplex or Simple Extension tool, designed to create and manage simple extensions. So what do we mean by simple extension, and what does it look like, and what can it do? That we'll elaborate on that. But this was the activity update, and I think this is a good time to just pause and ask you if you have any questions to any of the things that we have presented you for right now, or anyone on the online. Yeah.
I already replied one online that was about a pathologist that is using the NLM questionnaire editor tool that we mentioned, and he's worried if we will do something in parallel. No, actually, the workflow we propose to most people that are adopting questionnaires today starts using the NLM Fire questionnaire editor, which actually we help them to improve the support for SNOMED. So they were really kind to work with us and listen to our ideas. And now the National Library of Medicine, the Fire questionnaire form editor they have is actually connected to the terminology server of SNOMED International, to the one in the browser. So we are really working with them with that. And the idea is that people can start using that to create the questionnaires. And then we provide some advice on how you can design a workflow with the validation step, publication, and something like that. So we will demonstrate that in the second part of this session after the break.
It'll be after all the Simplex things, right near the end. But yeah.
You do? Yeah. Oh, then I'll continue. Okay. So let's dive into Simplex and what it is. So when you implement SNOMED CT, and one of the things that so I come from the education team before, and one of the things that we've always said about SNOMED is that it's extensible. Wow, it can do all of these things. You can customize it, you can tailor it, and it's a fact, it's possible. So it is. I've always been a fan of the SNOMED model because of this, that it is extensible and it has such a robust versioning mechanism and release mechanism, or release format. The problem is when you then start to do these customizations, and if you want to distribute those customizations to other and make sure you have all the versioning and the correct format of these derivatives or artifacts that you developed, how do you manage that, and how do you release those so that you can distribute it and make sure that you have all the versioning in place? That's not an easy thing to do. It requires you to either be for members, for national release centers, you can be a part of the managed service. So SNOMED International can help you. There's a range of providers that can support you in this, creating your release files for your national extension or your local edition of SNOMED. But very often it can also just be, maybe it could be a large vendor who wants to create maybe a set of sets that they use within their system, and they want to distribute that to their various customers. That could be one situation. It could also be a country that are not part of managed service or haven't gone through the procurement to procure or to have a third-party provider of a terminology management system. And we at SNOMED International find that subsets, maps, translations, I've already talked about, and creating local concepts is something that almost any implementation face. It's something that is needed to make SNOMED CT work in the systems. So, and we've known that for years. We've developed tools that can help you to create these subsets, can create the translations, can do the mapping. So we have these freely available tools that people can sit down, use, and create their SNOMED derivatives or artifacts. There's also quite a few who use spreadsheets to do a map or to specify a terminology binding. I'm sure if I asked you to raise your hands, you would not. And yeah, that's me, because it's, how do you start? And a spreadsheet is a very flexible way to start. The problem is that it's doomed to be chaotic at some point. It's doomed to be, there will be errors, manual errors, copy pasting. What about when you want to update to a new version? How do you check which of those codes that you have copied and pasted into the cells? How do you know which one are now inactive? It's a very, very time-consuming process to manage SNOMED CT derivatives in a spreadsheet. You need some help. So that's why we have always said, well, use Snap to SNOMED, use the RefSet tool. But what then when you have created these fantastic subsets and good translations and you have these files, how do you get to the point of actually producing your release? That has been a gap. And that's illustrated in this slide, that there is a gap with the red cross here. So we have terminology tooling vendors, managed service users that can produce release, SNOMED CT release package. But if you are one of those organizations using free tools, using spreadsheets, how do you create your release?
Thank you. And yeah, and basically this happens for different reasons. Sometimes it's a maturity reason. Sometimes you're starting your extension and you still don't know how to organize your team. You have one person that can easily go to the RefSet editor and create a RefSet, but you don't have a mature team that will help you make the decision about the tooling. The tooling is a complex decision. Tooling is expensive. It has a long-term commitment. So it's not easy to do that step. And we realize that many countries are still in that moment. They're already creating RefSets, they're already translating, but they have not organized the administrative procedures to get an extension management tool. So this is, the idea is this should be open to everyone. So it's really easy to access, yes. And this should be a tool that is almost always a transition, since your first steps in your first extension in SNOMED CT until when you reach a level of maturity in which you will need a full-fledged outsourcing tool that will allow you to create all the different possibilities that SNOMED provides. But the idea is that you should be able to start with this really fast and completely for free, yes? And this, for SNOMED International, we had to create a service that will be scalable, yes, that we will support many people using the service without requiring us a lot of effort to support each one of them. So the idea is the service that SNOMED will provide in the Simplex philosophy should be a generic service. It will provide the same features to everyone. If someone has a special request or a special feature, they will probably, that means that they have outgrown the Simplex service and now they need a full outsourcing tool to do all those special things. So we will only implement the simple features, kind of like this 80-20 thing, that we will implement the small set of features that will cover 80% of what an NRC or a small organization or an implementer in a hospital will need. Yes, but when you grow above that, you probably will need a more robust tool. Yes, and the idea we will need to provide a lot of guidance, yes, and a lot of information and knowledge bases to help users do everything themselves. And that's the key of being scalable. The users should be able to start a blank extension, to select the components, to say, I want to include this ref set from the ref set tool, this translation from WebLate, this other subset from an Excel file I have, and compile that, click a button, process, import everything, review the quality, and get the results from there. Yes, and the idea is that there are a lot of existing tools in SNOMED that can help you do that. We have, like Anna was describing, we have the RefSet tool translation, the WebLate, Snap to SNOMED, and many more. And also we have infrastructure that is being used for the managed services and for the international edition about quality measuring and validation and release packaging. So if we can use these tools in an automatic way, we can help you to produce this simple extension, but with a high quality. So if you do these simple things, we can help you to produce something that you will be able to QA, and you can be confident that the files that are produced by this service are completely standard and perfect to be imported into any terminology server. You can give the files to a software provider, a vendor that has support for SNOMED, and they will be able to import those files and start using your brand new extension. Yes, so the idea is that the features that we will focus is creating subsets, simple subsets, set of concepts to say these 10 concepts are related to these. The subsets can either be intentional or extensional, but when you import to Simplex, they will be already expanded. Yes, so you can create the subsets in the subset tool using an ECL, for example, but then you expand the subset, you create the export file with 10,000 concepts or something like that, and we put this file into your new extension using Simplex. And for maps, we're using Snap to SNOMED. So there are simple maps that mostly are used for mapping local vocabularies or local terminologies to SNOMED. Yes, and you can define all that. There's a small workflow for validation inside Snap to SNOMED. And when you finish, you can version components in Snap to SNOMED as well. And when you finish, you can download the map and use it to upload here. And one interesting thing about these tools is that these tools allows you to create the first version of your subset or the first version of your map, and they contain features that would allow you to update your map or your subset to new editions of SNOMED. Yes, so if a new edition was released in the international edition, you can change your dependency in these tools, and you can run processes that will highlight all the things that you need to change in order to be compatible to the latest international edition. So all those fixes about how to update dependencies to new editions, you do that in the subset tool or in the mapping tool, for example. And when you export, the export is already clean. The export already is updated to the latest dependency. The same for WebLate and things like that. One use case that we thought it was interesting was adding synonyms. Sometimes when you're doing an implementation, you have local acronyms or local color jargon, things that you want to add, if you want to find things in a different way. And this is rather simple. Yeah? So we will support that through an Excel file in which you will add the concept ID and the synonym you want to add, and that will be included in the extension that you're creating. And the final part about creating local concepts, you know that concept authoring is the most complex part of SNOMED. That's why we have authoring course level 1, level 2 certifications. It's really, really challenging and complex. So sticking to this philosophy of resolving the simple things, what we will help you do in Simplex is creating very simple concepts, for example, with a single parent. So you say, I want to create a concept. This is the parent, and this is the term of the concept. And there are no attributes, there are no definitions, there are no roles. The concept is simple to classify. And this is something that you can easily do in a spreadsheet, for example. So if you need one concept for mapping to a terminology, or you need one concept to be compliant with something in the communicable diseases list, or some ingredient or substance for a product, you can create them in a very basic way. And when you start to say, okay, I would like to add a definition to the concept, I want to add the properties, and I want to fully model the concept, then that means that you have outgrown Simplex, and you need to go to the next step. You need to go to a more mature tool that will help you do all the advanced things that SNOMED can do. And the goal is to, all these things, like in the diagram that Anna showed, will be assembled into your new edition. This is an extension from the international edition or from some other ones. Yes? Okay, because it's a diagram about that. And you will be able to browse the content of the edition. There will be a browser attached to this new edition you create, so you can import content. You can wait until all the processes are run. Everything will be like in a queue. So you say, import this, and import this, and you will see jobs. The guy will show it later. And you have to wait until all these processes are created. And then you will be able to click a button and see all the things that you created in the browser itself. And also in a queue, a validation process will run, and you will be notified later with all the findings to say this concept is missing a description, this description is duplicate, this subset has the same concept twice, or this concept in a subset is inactive, or things like that. And then you will be able to go back to the original tool, make the fixes, and then import the file again and resolve it. So you can see how this is not like a fully integrated authoring environment, but a tool that creates releases for you in a very simple way. So this is like the architecture diagram. These are all the tools and models that will be supported. Yes, you will import files that you export from Weblate, from the RefSet and translation tool, from Snap to SNOMED. And there's a new RefSet tool that is being developed. Now we will support that as well. It's always about to be released. The Snap to SNOMED and some spreadsheets. So Simplex is that missing link. Simplex is what connects all these tools with a release without you having to go through the process of procuring. And sometimes the delay to do that is just administrative. Countries, for example, need to go through a very complex administrative process in order to decide the procurement of a release authoring tool. So this tries to fill that gap while you're trying to fix all the administrative procedures. So you will have all the information. When you have the RF2 release, you can send it everywhere you need. Yes. And this is how it looks like. Yes, this is a screenshot of the Simplex Toolkit. It's really simple. After the break, we will do a live demo and you will see it working. But the idea is that this is how you see your edition. Your edition has all the artifacts you have loaded. In this example, there's a subset, another subset, there's a map and a translation, yes? And each one of them, you can see when it was updated for the last time, what's the size, how many components it has inside, and you have a button to upload the file to this component, yes? And you can go through them and say, well, we'll update this, I will update this, I will update this, and then at some point you will be able to run the validations and say, okay, we'll close this edition and I will create a release. Yes, and this is a version mechanism. And then you can download the files and share it with someone else. So
we have a question on online from Vassos about where you can find Simplex on the website, and we will provide you with links and guidance and everything, but it's too early. We don't have it ready. So this is like, and we'll talk after the demo. We'll talk a bit about the progress, the status, and our expectations for release of this. So it's not available yet, but Vassos will make sure to make huge announcements when we are ready.
We're running half an hour early, so we're just trying to decide whether we should just run the demo now or we should break early. I think we could just run the demo because we've got lots of other demos to show to fill the gap. So it's fine. I'll share my screen. Yeah. Yeah, I think this solution outline could have been a lot more complicated. We're leveraging a lot of the existing work that the technical team have done around classification, validation, release packaging, all those things. But yeah, I guess this is the simplified view. So we're telling you all about the service because it's coming. Right now, it's still in development. And at the beginning of the year, we'll start opening to a couple of early adopters. But yeah, we're very much in the development phase at the moment. So apologies that it's still a bit rough. We wanted to show a demo because it's a bit mean telling you about all these features without showing something. Huh?
You want to use it and hold your mic.
That's okay. I'll go one-handed. So when you log into the Simplex tool, well, to start with, you'll need to fill in some sort of simple application form to say, I'd like to create an extension. You will need a namespace identifier, so you'll need to register for a namespace with SNOMED International. And then you'll fill in this registration form, and probably after a few days, you'll be sent a login, and then you'll be able to go to the tool. This is the kind of area in the tool where you can see the details of your extension. You'll have your own SNOMED CT module, and you'll be dependent on a specific version of either the international edition, or maybe you're extending a national extension to localize it in some way. So this is the area where you'll edit content. And there's 3 types of content you can create. You can create a subset or a map or a translation, and I'll demonstrate each one. The general principle is that you create some artifact, and then you run some import from one of the free tools, and then you can see it in the browser, and then you can run validation. So let's do a subset. I've already created the subset. Actually, hold my mic. I'm going to create another one.
Say something else. When you start an extension, the system automatically creates the module for you, the language reference, everything that is required for that extension is created for you using your namespace. Usually you will apply for a namespace ID, and then you will use that in the configuration of the system.
I'm creating a smoking status simple reference set or subset. So subsets, obviously in SNOMED land, they're represented as simple reference sets. So when we create a subset, the tool has to create a simple reference set in the SNOMED hierarchy, which is done. And then we can use something like the ref set and translation tool to actually create the content. So here I've already created a smoking status subset. And the ref set and translation tool has 2 ways of, or 2 types of subset it can create. It can create it as a reference set, which fills in all the concept identifiers and generates UIDs and does some of the SNOMED stuff. Or you can create a local set, which is a more simple kind of list of codes. So we recommend using the local set because Snap to SNOMED is going to do Simplex is going to do all the concept identifiers and things. So we've created a local set, and we've used an ECL definition saying this set contains the descendants of finding of tobacco smoking behavior. So we've got around 60 members. And then we download we export the subset, the list of members, and we get some text file, and then we go back over and we simply just import it. Now, for each of these artifact types, there's usually a few different types of imports. It could be a spreadsheet, or it could be a specific tool. In this case, we're using the refset tool for import. So we'll choose the file. I don't think you can see the pop-up, but I'm just choosing the file here.
We haven't spoken too much about the spreadsheets that are supported, and that's because we are still to define the format of these, but there will be guidance associated with Simplex where we'll outline what are the types of spreadsheets that you can import and the format of these.
So we've got a job list here, like things that are happening. This import of the subset is completed. We've got 60 new records. So this subset now has 60 rows, and we can go and see that straight away in the authoring browser. So this authoring browser is a way to see your sort of in progress authoring cycle. This stuff isn't published yet. The release hasn't been done. It's not appropriate really to sort of show the public. It's your internal, part of your internal authoring process. But on clicking this test subset, we've opened the browser and it's navigated to our test subset. And it shows up here that we're browsing the kind of daily build of this Atlanta Expo test edition. It's not a specific version, it's part of the release cycle. So if we want to see the RefSet members, we can use this tab here, members, and we can see the list. So these are the list of concepts in that subset. So this subset's actually ready to go. It could be published, but there's going to need to be some process around this. We can't publish a subset individually. We have to come to a stage where everything in our edition is ready and it's been validated, classified, and then we're ready to close the release cycle of the whole edition. And at that point, everything will get published at once. Yeah.
And this is part of the simplification. Yes, it could be possible for you to put like a component in draft and wait and not publish, but this is a simple way. Everything you have there will be published in the moment you want to publish. And then you need to be sure that all your components are updated and validated before publishing, for example.
Second example, we're going to do a map. We're going to come from Snap to SNOMED. Here, as part of the Barmany project, we, and to support a clinical decision support rule, we took a licensed copy of the ATC DDD substance codes, and we've mapped those substances to the SNOMED substances. And there's around 2,000 substances here, and they're the ones that are typically found in drugs. So we can run an export. And Anna's going to have to help me because I've completely forgotten where the export button is. Oh, it's here. It's here. It's here. So we can run an export of this map. Now, there's a review process in here, and it's only the rows that have got a status of mapped, which will go across. So even if you're halfway through building this map and you haven't reviewed it all yet, it's okay. You can still run the export, and Simplex will only take in those rows that have been reviewed. So we can run an export of, no, I can't remember the format. I think it's the Excel one we're using. We'll have plenty of guidance and YouTube videos and all the rest of it on all these steps once we're ready for publication. So I've downloaded that file, and I can come here and I can say, yes, I want a new map, and I've given it a name, and I run create. Now, this type of map, I think it's a 2 SNOMED CT with correlation type map. That complexity is kind of hidden here. So we select the map.
Yeah, it's only simple maps that's supported in the Simplex Toolkit. Complex maps are not.
Yeah, it's a simple map with correlation.
Yeah, with correlation.
I'll grab the file that was exported, and I'll click upload, and I'll cross my fingers. That's the only option in this one. There may be a spreadsheet option next time. I'm crossing my fingers, but in typical fashion of a live demo, I can't see the import. No, that's something else. I tested this morning. As I said, this one's in development. So this map will get uploaded, and the map records will get created. Let's move on and do a translation. Yeah. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Can you repeat?
Yeah,
for the online audience?
yeah, thank you. This new metadata concept you created, where is it placed in the hierarchy? It's a simple map. Okay, and it does that automatically. Yeah, okay, that's cool. But if I want to put it under Norwegian, blah 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 blah.
You can change it. Oh,
okay, but it's still cool. It's still cool.
Yeah, that's part of the simplification. It will go to the standard place. Yeah, you know, some countries prefer to group the ref sets or the maps below like a national concept. But yes, this is again to the part we do it equal to everyone, so it's simple to maintain. There are no errors. It's simple to explain.
Yeah, and I would also say that the international recommendation is to follow the structure of the model component hierarchy, and so in the reference set hierarchy, follow that structure. Although, as Alejandro say, some countries prefer to group their things, but the module will really indicate what extension it belongs to. So we follow the general guidelines for this. Yeah.
It's a great question, because again, there's a risk of producing tooling that sounds too good to be true. This one has a lot of restrictions. You know, the concepts that represent this map will be created in the namespace of this extension. It will have the module of this extension. So those are the identifying features. You could use a name to say it's the Norwegian ATC to SNOMED substance map, something like that, but we're not going to allow customizing the structure, we don't think. So that upload has now completed. We've got 1,700 rows. And again, we can click on members. I'm going to talk to the technical team about improving browsing different types of reference set members, because they all look like, in this view, simple reference sets. This one's a map, and there's a lot more details that can be shown. So I'm going to go to Sonia and Beg, and it probably won't happen for a while, because she's already scheduled things.
Yeah, yeah, maybe we should do that. Just show that you could use the expression constraint language to find members of a subset. Do you want me?
We're going down a rabbit hole.
All right. Well, we are happy to show you that you could use the browser and use DCL for a map.
The last artifact type then is a translation, and there's a couple of sources of translation. It could be the refset and translation tool, or it could be Weblate. There is going to be some work, I think, next year to do some enhancements in the area of translation tooling. So yeah, we're kind of supporting both at the moment. So here we've got some terms that have been translated to Vietnamese, and they are all procedures. We can go and download those. So we can say download translation. And then we can go back into Simplex and create the translation. Please hold my mic.
And this is the same. Each one of your artifacts has a concept, and this is creating the concept. It's in your namespace, in the right place, in the hierarchy, and now you're importing the data.
So again, we've got two types of import we can run, and we're selecting the Weblate source. And we need to put in a language code here because the Weblate export doesn't say what language they are, so we need to tell it.
And each time you launch a job, there will be a queue. So if this is how we plan also to provide a free service scaling. If there are hundreds of users around the world at the same time, you will have to wait a bit more maybe while this is important.
There's no queue at the moment, so this one ran pretty quick. Here we've got the concept we created, my translation. It's a type of language reference set, as you'd expect. And in the members, we can see the concepts that are members of this language reference set. I think there's around 400 here. And we can go and see the individual concepts. And of course, they have, what's been inherited from the international edition, the English terms. And they also have a preferred term in the Vietnamese language and language reference set. And we can see, this is the preferred term here. So when we, once we've uploaded a translation, when we open the browser knows that we are interested in this language, and it will try to find terms in the translated language. And by default, it will start showing everything in your translation without any sort of changes. It's kind of like an automatic configuration. So yeah, that's nice.
And this is really, if you have been working with or trying to do this for a long time, probably you value the importance of this, because reaching this point to see your extension in a browser that you can download and put into the terminology server, it was really complex. Some countries went months or years trying to achieve that point. And by simplifying the use case, we are now able to have this in a few minutes. So this extension didn't exist before, and now we have subset maps, translations, and we are ready to be used in implementation. Well, not ready because there will be a quality assurance process. You will explain a bit.
Yeah, I will. It's kind of fun how simple this looks. We're really leveraging the work that I've been working in the technical team for the last sort of 9 or 10 years, building up the managed service, the browser, and it's all quite kind of configuration heavy. With this tool, we're really trying to make everything configured automatically, have things work intuitively and simply. Obviously there's a lot of restrictions. So let's talk a little bit about the release process. So once you've created all these artifacts that you want, and you've checked them in the browser and you're happy with them, you can start going into the release process. So first you'll need to run classification. You won't be able to see the classification results really. It's just something that needs to happen to unlock the next stage. This tool, it will allow creating some simple concepts, but obviously the concepts to support these reference sets, but it would be possible also to create other types of simple concepts in other hierarchies, but they won't have any modeling. They won't have any stated attributes. We're going for the most basic thing. So that's why the classification results will just kind of accept themselves. There won't be anything to do. The next, once classification is completed, the next stage will unlock. You'll need to run a validation. Now, during the validation process, we'll be using all the same automatic validation as they have in the managed service, and when producing the international edition or any of the national extensions that are maintained there. So it's the same level of validation. Now, it may be that there are some validation failures, and something that we as a team need to do over the next 2 or 3 months is to go through all those validation rules. I think there's around 400 of them, and identify which of them would be possible to fail using this tooling, and then come up with strategies of how to either avoid them completely or how to deal with them and mitigate them. So that's the high thing on my to-do list.
By restricting the use case, again, by reducing the number of possible errors. So even when you're working with managed service and you have the power to do everything, you have a diversity of possible errors that you can have. And some are simple and some are complex to resolve. But having this very narrow use case, we are reducing that to the minimum, and we can provide specific advice about each one.
So the idea of these release actions is you'll do each one in order, and you won't be able to get to the end one of completing your release cycle, versioning your content, and creating your RF2 release package until they've all completed. So this tool will actually prevent you going any further if there are serious validation issues. The tool is going to block you from creating your release. But once you're your validation issues are, either resolved or everything's clean, then you can do a final review in the browser and then complete your release cycle. So at that point, when the release cycle is completed, the content will all be version stamped, given an effective time. There'll be a new release archive to download and to distribute to your country or to your organization. And the tool will automatically start a new release cycle. So then you can go and, either edit your existing artifacts or create new ones and, start the new phase. Typically, national extensions usually do a release every 6 months. Some of them are moving to monthly releases. This tool will give you a lot of flexibility because you won't be relying on anyone else to do your validation or do your release cycle, because everything's automatic. We've automated the whole lot. But on the flip side, we're going to need to provide guidance around, what's a good cadence to follow, what the processes you need to do. There's quite a lot of work here. Once you've done your first release, you probably want to update to a new international edition dependency. And then there's a bit of maintenance to do for each of these. You need to go back into the ref set and translation tool, for example, to check, if any of those concepts you've used have become inactive. There'll be a whole process around it. Yeah. Can I pass you the mic for people online? There's a fair number. Can you tuck in, please? We don't have a roaming mic in this session. It's just this one.
So where you were showing that you were going to run classification, are you doing that on the ref set?
Classification runs on the whole substrate. So the ref set concept, which is just a metadata concept, is the only thing that really needs to be classified. You could argue that even that doesn't need to be classified because you could just automatically create the inferred relationship. We know what it's going to be. It's going to be a type of simple reference set. But yeah, we always classify everything on the substrate. Yeah, it's just standard practice. As I said before, it will be possible to create some concepts. You could create a clinical concept, which is just like a placeholder for like a content request that you're making, just so you can get an identifier for it and you can get a preferred term for it. But it won't really have any modeling. It will have a clinical concept as a parent. When you run classification, you will inherit the modeling of that parent. So you may inherit, as well as an is a relationship, you may inherit, a full model as a primitive concept. So there is some point of classification.
So you're taking the ref set file, the format in the ref set file is different from the standard file. So you're just mapping that concept ID to the standard RF2 and then run the classifier on that.
Yeah. This tooling actually uses the Snowstorm terminology server. It's an authoring terminology server, similar to the V2I, SnowOwl, and SnowRay server. They've got some parallels. So this tool actually stores everything directly in an RF2 format. It's not stored in any other format. So we basically got an RF2 substrate, and we're classifying the whole substrate before we run validation. So yeah, we're not doing anything specific with the reference sets, but yeah, they are part of the substrate. I don't know if I'm answering your questions. Catch up with me in the break. You still look blank. I'm not. Okay.
Okay, so it's now 10:30 and it's time for a break. If you, during the break, talk to some of your colleagues and friends here and have some questions, we'll do a bit of talk after the break about the future for Simplex the next couple of months and years. And please raise any questions. We also had some good questions in the chat. And during the demonstrations afterwards, where we're also looking at post-coordination, one of the questions just raised by Adam on severity, I'll talk to that there as well. So have a good one, and we'll see you again in 30 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. So I hope you had a good break and we're ready to proceed with this session, providing an update from the implementation support team. And we have just been looking at Simplex and talking a bit about the features, and we have already looked at the tool.
I was talking to a few people during the break, and we had originally planned to do the Simplex demo after the break, which is now. We've got a few new members of the audience who want to see it, so I'm just going to spend a minute or two going through some of the demonstration again before we move on. So luckily this is recorded. So those of you in the audience who have just come to see the Simplex stuff, we've already gone over kind of the principles and the high level solution. This tool is currently in development. We're aiming to take on the first couple of early adopters in the new year. But essentially you have an edition that has its own module. And you can create and maintain different types of artifacts. Those could be subsets, maps, or translations. And they all work by importing from the other free tools that SNOMED International provides, like the refset and translation tool, the weblate tool, or the Snap to SNOMED tool. We saw how you can see those concepts in the browser. For example, this translation reference set, and you can see the members that have been translated. Here we've got some Vietnamese terms. And then we talked a little bit about there'll be a kind of forced process which takes you through classification, validation, review of the content before you're able to close the release cycle and produce an RF2 release. We need to work through what types of validation failures can happen and what's going to be the path to resolution. There's still work to do on that. I think we've got a couple more slides on Simplex to finish off this topic. So to try and be very upfront and clear, we've put together this matrix. Apologies, it's a bit small. There's a lot to fit on the screen, with a comparison between the Simplex offering and the managed service offering. So the audience for Simplex will include international members, national release centers, and also international affiliates. So it could be, a group of hospitals or a vendor or anyone else. At the moment, unfortunately, we're only able to accept national release centers onto the managed service. So that's the first key difference. Most of the other things are about the types of features. So the Simplex tool is kind of the types of features and the level of support. So with Simplex, really, it's completely self-service. You'll be supporting yourselves. You'll be setting everything up yourselves. We'll try and make it as simple as possible, and there'll be good guidance documentation, but there won't be a great deal of support. You won't be able to have a lot of technical support from us, but hopefully you won't need it. So that's a big difference from the managed service. I know the technical team spend a lot of man hours supporting the various national extensions when they're in the managed service. The content types are a bit different. There's a lot of overlap, which we talked about, but the key difference really is around modeling. So in Simplex, you won't be able to create concepts that have got new stated, defining properties. You'll only be able to create primitive concepts with a single parent. You won't be able to use any, advanced description logic features. And finally, the Simplex tool won't support the maintenance of complex or extended maps. That's something that is available in managed service. They both create release packages and support validation. But if there are validation issues, we're going to need to work out a way that you can support yourself in resolving those. And we'll make it as simple as possible. But that's something that's we still need to work through in the next few months. I'm wondering what's next. The roadmap. You want to go?
Yeah, I'm gonna go. So the goal is we need to adjust, in order to, so the tool is self-service, we need to go through all the necessary tests to experience all the problems and prepare fixes and fallbacks and advice to help users go through that. So we need to start with a small group of users. We need to start, we are now recruiting a few early adopters, and we invite you, if you're interested in being an early adopter, please contact us. There will be a limit on the number of sites that we can accept in the beginning. The idea is there should be a group that really uses the tool, that will go through creating releases and using the releases, so we can learn from them what are the obstacles. In this small test, we will work with you, we will help you, and we will help you resolve all the problems. And the goal is to learn from this group and start offering this service to a broader audience. So we are expecting to be able to, in Q3 2024, to do an open beta and start receiving more invitations and increasing the number of users. In general, we will be refining the process. So it's really seamless and it's really possible to implement something like this. And we aim to have a fully open service in 2025. This is part of what you consider the feasibility of the project. Yes, we know these are complex tools, this is expensive. We have a large team managing the managed service product. Every time you have a problem, you have experts helping you going through each step. So in order to make it fully self-service, we need to go through this gradual process of accepting more and more people.
And just to reiterate that the self-service approach isn't because we're mean and that we don't want to help you. It's really driven by the need for scalability. We think, there's a lot of potential users to this tool, and if they all need support, then we won't be able to, it won't be viable.
Yeah, some countries, the members have expressed, as we have a browser, we would like to have something similar that will allow you to edit content. So, and it's right, it's a reasonable thing to ask, but we realize that the human resources that you need to support a country going through a release process is the limitation. Yes, it's not just the tool or the technical software, the availability of the software, but rather the support you need to go to work with the country through all these steps. So the way we found to have a free service is to go through that. What should I do? Oh, there's a question. There's a question, will there be a need for login to access the tool, validation of users? Yes, there will be a login. There will be like initial configuration of the parameters for the extension, like your namespace ID, some preferences, the name of your project. And we will do that for the people who are working with us in this initial early adopters phase. And later, it will be a login required. It will be the same login, the Confluence login, like Snap to SNOMED, like the other tools. And you will create a new project, you will enter the parameters yourself, and it will be done for you.
There was a question earlier that I'm not sure if we answered. It was from Vascos. Yeah, we have. Okay, perfect. We're going to pause here if there's any questions in the audience before we move on to a different topic.
So, no extra compared to what I mean.
Yeah.
Camila, no extra work compared to what? Yes, probably. Login. No, exactly. You just need to log in, and in the beginning, you will log in and you will see the extension created for you, because we will do that for you to prepare the extension. In the future, there will be a form that will create the extension for you.
Yeah, and that relates to what you said, Alejandro, about the early adopters. And I think I'm just emphasizing what you already said, but I think if you're sitting there, because we understand that, yeah, there are probably a range of us who would like to have access to this tool and play around and create our extensions. But in this phase, we really are seeking people who have a real use case, who have a need to create an extension for some actual purpose, not for playing around. So, yeah. Yeah. So where are we on the agenda? Okay, so we have come to the part of this agenda, the last part, on which we have called demonstrator showcase. And so I'm going to talk about the new enhancements to Snap to SNOMED. Alejandro is going to talk about and show the terminology binding tool or demonstrator and the FHIR questionnaires. We already touched on that. And Kai, you're going to talk about post coordination. So that is how we have divided it. And I have to say, can just be honest, that when I was awake at 3 o'clock this morning, one of the things I was thinking about is how am I going to do a demo of dual mapping on this small monitor for an audience. So that is going to be pretty exciting, I can just tell you. And you'll have to bear with me if it completely fails, but we'll try. Yeah, I want to share my screen. Okay. So let's look at Snap to SNOMED. So we have Snap to SNOMED, and we are really not yet, at some point. And we love this tool, and we've also heard Charles Gottfried talking about how it really makes SNOMED real for many people coming from a no SNOMED CT world, and actually start learning about SNOMED, just actually having their local terms and suddenly see them transformed into SNOMED. And it is a really good tool to work with, and it's we are really pleased with the look and feel and everything of this tool. And as I said before, when talking about Snap to SNOMED, a range of new features were requested from users, and some of them have now been developed thanks to our great team at CSIRO. And the features I want to talk to here is about the streamlined login process, the dual author mode with reconciliation. There's now an enhanced support for replacement of inactive concepts. The tool now offers an improved way of looking at the concept definitions, and there are some enhanced export formats where you can export multiple columns. For those of you who have been working with the tool, know that one of the most recent features that was added was the addition of multiple columns in the source code set. And now you can also have them in the export format, also including additional details such as notes and informations about authors. There's also a new feature to export to the FHIR concept map format. All these new great things are not available if you log into SNOMED or Snap to SNOMED today, but it will be. We are hoping to be able to deploy the new version of Snap to SNOMED in November, or definitely this year. So let's talk a bit about the dual authoring process. So today, when you log into Snap to SNOMED, the tool supports the single author, single reviewer mode. So where you have a source code set, you load that into the tool, and each of the map rows within your source code set can be assigned to a single mapper, and the person will map it, and the mapped row will then be assigned to a reviewer who can accept, reject the map. And that is roughly how the workflow looks at a high level. And now, and this I think these two diagrams, if you look at this one without me having talked to it yet, and this one, it also shows the complexity of the new feature. So we want the tool to support dual mapping. It's not an easy thing to just implement. It really requires a lot of careful thinking about how can we make sure that the tool continues to look as seamless and lightweight as it does, and then support this very complex workflow. And we look forward to just hearing when we get this deployed, to hearing what you feel, because we have quite a good feeling about this. But now In the new version, it will be the same. You load the source code set. You decide when you define your map whether it's a dual author mode mapping project or whether it's a single mapper, single reviewer workflow. And then each of the source codes where you before could only assign that to a single user, you can now assign it to two user or two mappers as you see it here. And each of those mappers can go in and perform their map, but they can't see what the other mapper has mapped to, right? So they can't get help from the other mapper. That's the point. And then the system will check whether the mappers, once they have mapped these source codes, whether they have selected the same concept. Because if they have, it will go directly into or be accessible for the reviewer to accept or reject the selected map target. And if the two mappers disagree on what is the target code for this map, then it will go into a reconcile mode. So a person that has been assigned the reconciliator for this project will have to go in and look at the two different maps that have been performed and decide what is the right one. And after that, it will be forwarded to a reviewer who can accept or reject that decision. And I'm so glad that Kalin, you're sitting there. Is that roughly right, that this is what is going to happen? Good. And we have a question, Katrin.
Can the reviewer and the reconciler be the same person? Yeah, okay.
Yes, it can be the same person. And we have Kalin from CSIDO, which is the group that's working with us in the SNOMED.
So we didn't enforce any rules about who can be, because I think we're leaving that for your business processes because everyone is different. But a mapper can be a reconciler or a reviewer, even though maybe in your practice that's not ideal. But we've kind of left it open so that we know that there's really small teams and you have multiple roles. So you may need to do multiple processes.
Okay, so now it happens. Now I'm starting the demo. So I'm both Frank and Jimmy and Anne. And the fourth person is Alejandro. You can be yourself. Okay, is that good? So let us go into SNOMED. Yeah, so. I have this bar here. Yeah. Give me just a moment to make sure what screens I have here. So here I am. I'll just log in here as me.
I'm noticing multiple browsers. My fingers are crossed.
I need to get this to work, I need to use Safari, and I need to use Chrome and an incognito version of, otherwise I can't do it. But I have rehearsed, but that is not a guarantee at all.
Maybe it's simpler than using 3 laptops at once, I'm not sure.
I did also consider that, but okay, be patient here. So we'll do the dual map demo. And you can see I'm an owner of this map, and there are some different members. Frank, Jimmy, Alejandro, and I are in this dual map. I'll go in as Anne, as the owner. Okay. And I can look at what tasks do we have in this project. Just show you. There are 2 authors. There's an authoring task for Jimmy and one for Frank, and they have been assigned to all of these rows here in our map. You can also see them here, that there are 2 authors assigned. So that's all good. So let us now log in as Frank here. I'll just do that. Welcome, Frank. Good. Frank is here, and we will do it here. So now I'm Frank, and let us just And we saw that there was authoring task assigned to both Frank and Jimmy. So I'll, as Frank, select my authoring task. And let's just look at the first two and say, okay, hypertension. And let's say I'm doing a map here. So Frank thinks benign hypertension is a good one, and he'll put it in here, over here, as a benign hypertension. That is his map. He said mapped, and he'll continue. And then we have an obese, the concept obese. He believes that the correct code to choose here is obese abdomen. So select that, drag it over. Maybe he finds that that's an equivalent. And then he'll put this to mapped. So that's all good. I'll go back here and you can see that Frank has now mapped these two targets here, and he's put them into, or should assign these map rows with these two targets and with the status of mapped. So that's good. His work with these two are done. And now I'm turning into Jimmy. So I'll just open a new window here. I actually thought I had this open, but I haven't. So right now I'm logging in as the other mapper, Jimmy. Here he was. That's great. So there's Jimmy. And he goes into the tool and he can see that there are mapping work to do for him. And he'll select his authoring task and he'll see here. And he'll get started. It's the same source codes that he sees because he's also been assigned to all these codes, and he'll go into hypertension. No, he's a bit lazy. He wants help. He'll select all of them, and he doesn't even have to select just to show. He'll just auto map everything, and trust the auto map feature to do a good job.
Can I ask a question? I noticed that when Jimmy came in, he couldn't see what the other author had done. Is that why it's called blind?
Yeah. That's a blinded part of it, that he can't cheat by looking at what Frank had done, right, and get inspired. Yeah. He has to do, but then still Jimmy wanted the auto map to get a bit of help.
He's found another way to be lazy.
Yeah, but that's good. That's good because we can see if you notice what Frank selected and you now see what the tool selected, you may trust the tool better than Frank. But let's see. So I'll put these into map. I do this from here. You don't have to go into the detailed view. You can do it here. So now both of these have been mapped. And now I'm much more calm now because now I can be Anne. And I'll go back to being myself here. So now I'm Anne. I'm the reconciler. So if you looked on the tasks, if we look at the tasks that were created, you can also see there is a reconcile task. This is a new type of task in Snap to SNOMED. It wasn't there before, but now we have the reconciliation task here, and I'm the reconciler. So I'll go into reconcile task, select that, and I'll now see that there are two source codes. I see 4 rows because we have had these two mappers. So if I go into this one, I can see that Frank selected this one and Jimmy selected that one. So now I can decide which of these I would believe would be the better one to choose. I can also remove both of them and select a completely other one. But I'll just, I'll remove the B9 one and I'll put that into maps. So now Alejandro is assigned as the reviewer for this. So if we asked Alejandro to log into this project, in his review task, he would be able to see this and he could then accept or reject the map. And we can also go into the other example here and look at which of these we would find. And I would delete this one, but I would maybe actually want to put this up into the equivalent one. And then this is mapped as well. So it worked. Woohoo! And I hope this gives you an idea about this new feature and how, and it depends again on your the workflow you're using, what is best. If it's the single map, single reviewer, so the simple workflow that's available, but now you can also do this a lot more complex, but also if you look in documentation, you can apply the process that really delivers a very high quality map, because you have multiple mappers that are doing this work, and you agree on stuff and have it this adjudicator to help you in the process. Is there a question?
I think Rene, the question, we had a question online, and Rene says, can be mapper to a mapping importation? I think he's meaning that if you can, one of the mappers can be like import the data from somewhere else and use it like, I don't know. It's,
yeah, I think you can map, but you can import a map, but you can't import a map into like a half blind. Yeah, it's not half blind. So the only way is to, if you want it to be blind, you have to do it completely within the tool, or you could do particular rows. So if you have a half done map that's already been half completed, and then you have some blank rows, you can make those rows blinded and do the dual mapping process for that. But you can't import as a mapper for half blind. Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to say is that you don't need to do a review process. That's up to you as well. So you could stop at the reconcile process if that was your business process as well. So yeah, up to you.
Yeah, that's a good point. That you have the opportunity to, after the reconcile, to put everything into a mapped status, and then you can do the export from there. Good. So let's move on to the next feature, which I'm also personally super excited about. And that's about versioning. So even in the current version of the tool, you can create new versions where you can say, well, the new version of this map should rely on a new version of SNOMED. So that is really where it helps compared to mapping also in a spreadsheet, that you have that efficient way of keeping your map up to date. And in the new version, we are now using the historical associations that are distributed with the release to propose replacements for map targets that are inactive in the new, or out of scope in the new applied version. So let us take a look at how that looks in the tool. And right now I'm thinking about, I can't remember if I'm Frank or Anne for this demo. So who am I? Let me just go in. Where do we have it? For some reason, I think I'm Frank. Yeah, so we have the inactivation demo here, and I'm just Frank. So we have a map here, and you can see that it uses the international edition from 2019. And these source codes have been mapped to SNOMED, and we have exported it. We've probably implemented it and used it for many years. But now it's time to produce a new, or to upgrade to a new version of SNOMED. So I click on the new version, and then I select the source code set hasn't changed. So if it had changed, for example, if our source code set had new members and stuff, we could upload a new version of the source code set as well, and give it a new version. But here we just want to update to a new target edition. So the international edition, and we'll take the latest one on this system. That is the September one. The scope hasn't changed, and we'll just save it here. And then it will create the new version. So the new thing now is this tag where it will show that there are targets that are out of scope. And yeah, don't consider the targets that were selected. It is purely for demonstration. So we now have targets that are out of scope. And I'll just create an author task for me, Frank. And I'll assign these. And I'll go into authoring mode to have a look at what is happening with these two. So if I go into this one, where the target is this concept, which I'm not going to pronounce, but this concept down here, where it says that it's target out of scope, and click to find suggested replacements. And I'll click on this triangle here. And then you can see that it proposes two new replacements. So let us take a look at, I actually want to just copy this identifier and go into the browser. So now I'm freestyling a bit from what I thought I would, but that's what happens often for me. So I'll just go into, and I don't know why this is not, oh, it is in English. I'll just look at that concept. Which is inactive. And we can just look at the ref sets for this. It has been inactivated because it was ambiguous. So that tells us already that that's why we see two new replacements. And we can see these are the two historical associations that are available in the possibly equivalent to association reference set. So these are the proposed replacements for this inactive concept. And if you look in Snap to SNOMED, you can see that these are the two concepts that are now being proposed. So what I would have to do here is to say, well, okay, the old target I want to delete. And then you need to consider whether you want both of these, because you can't do that in Snap to SNOMED. You can't have one source code that you map to multiple. You just can't apply rules for it. But this is possible, but you need to define whether it's the target relationship here, if they are inexact or broader to narrow and so forth. I'll just go here. I don't know why it says this, but that's why we haven't deployed it yet. So now we only see that there's an issue with the one. So let's look at what happens with this one. And again, I'll click here. And it has suggested something that is, to me, looks very like a good replacement. And I'll just delete the old one and be happy with this. Another thing that I can just show you as we are here is that over here to the, can I minimize a bit? To the right-hand side of this screen, you can see the target properties for the concept in focus. You can see the fully specified name, the terms, and whether it's active or inactive and so forth. But a new feature in Snap to SNOMED is that we are now also able to see the attribute relationships. So you're now go to the general properties, but the attribute relationships. So that is another feature that the users requested, that you didn't have to go to the browser to see how these concepts were defined, because before you could only see the terms and you could see the hierarchy in the middle, but now you can actually see the defining properties, and that can help you to make a more qualified decision on what map target to choose. So that was that feature. Then I'm not demonstrating this, just showing you that there are now extended formats in our export options. So before you were able to choose these three with comma separated tab in Excel, but now you can export to a FHIR concept map. And we have the Excel format that is an extended Excel format where you'll have any notes that have been documented. For example, for the EDQM work that was done, that was one of the things that they really needed, to be able to see each other's notes and comments, so they can now be exported. Yeah.
And this again goes back to Simplex, that this is the same kind of export we will do to send to Simplex. Not the new ones, but the old ones.
So do any of you have questions around Snap to SNOMED and these new enhancements? Yeah.
Thank you. Just wanted to confirm which version of FIRE the export to concept map is based on. Thank you.
FIRE R4.
Yeah, we have another question.
Yes, sir.
My turn. No, it's for those online.
Thank you. Very nice demo, and the tool looks great. Two questions about the first demo around resolution and reconciliation of the multiple mappers. Is there any ability to sort of facilitate feedback to the mappers, you know, to give them guidance? Did they get any feedback on that? Is the first question, and then there's a second question.
There are notes. You can use the notes, right, Kylin? I'll leave it to Kylin, but for each of the people involved in the map, there is the note. I didn't show you that there, but the notes are tracked, and I believe that would be a way to communicate.
Yeah, I think the notes communication function is quite simple. So they can leave notes so people can read them, but there's no sort of notification of any kind at this point. Yeah.
About the mapping suggestions, any thinking about, you know, in addition to suggested maps for retired targets, the idea of, you know, you've mapped something that's not equivalent, that has kind of a neighborhood that's moving around a bit that you might want to look at. Any thoughts about that?
Many thoughts about that, and many options to make further enhancements to say, okay, and also memory, mapping memory. So you've mapped similar things before, you've chosen these. So it's not something that is in the pipeline, but it's definitely subject to some cool mapping features if that was possible. Questions online? No. All right, but I'm happy to show you this some of these features again. If just come up to me and I'll show you, and I'm also sure Kylin is willing to show all of these great new features. So the next part of the agenda is on the terminology binding and the FIRE questionnaire. So over to Alejandro.
Thank you. And we introduced this a bit before, but based on some use cases we found, especially from national registries, that they need to capture this the information that is structured in order to be used. We are now working on this pipeline. Yes, we're trying to support users that want to implement FIRE questionnaires. FIRE questionnaires is one resource in the FIRE standard that allows you to define questions and answers. And previously, when the national registry, for example, wanted to use SNOMED to represent the values in the registry, they started creating ref sets. They say these are the options for this question, these are the options for these questions, and they ended up with 20 or 30 ref sets that are the necessary concepts to represent the information. But when you bring that to implementers, there's a long way until you can put that on a screen to capture the information from a doctor, because sometimes there are conditional logic between the questions are not clear, and it really requires a lot of effort. The use of FIRE questionnaires have been evolving a lot. There's a special group in FIRE called SDC, Structured Data Capture, that works on perfecting the questionnaires and creating logic for pre-populating questionnaires from the EHR, and then from extracting information from questionnaires. And also there are many tools that allows you to embed questionnaires into electronic health records. So if you have electronic health record that supports Smart on FIRE or that supports actually questionnaires, you can just render any questionnaire in your electronic health record, maybe pre-populate some questions if the information is available, and then you can enter the information, and then you will save, and the information can go back to the system. So in this process, we work with them trying to see how we can do that. But first, we had to improve, or we always working trying to improve the way we can teach people how to use terminology bindings. Yes, and that's the key of the questionnaires. When you're designing a UI, when you're designing an information model, the terminology bindings are the instructions that constrain the terminology to each one of these fields. And the first thing we designed was a playground, a sandbox, to create simple questionnaires that will be used in the implementation course. Yes, so when we are teaching you how to create terminology bindings, you actually have a screen in which you can go and play around and create bindings. And this is the sandbox we created first in this process. This is an educational tool and something we can do. And this is something that, in this case, I will load an example, but it will help you how to do it. You can create these simple forms in this tool. And you can say, this is a type of appendicitis, so a type APP. And it searches the different types of appendicitis. And that's because it's linked to an ECL, an expression constraints language query, which is all the kinds of appendicitis. You can create a free text clinical note. You can do a drop-down. For example, if instead of a search, your domain is really small, maybe you don't want the user need to type, maybe it's sufficiently small. So you can do a drop-down and you select one of these. Or you can do also a multiple selection. If you want to choose more than one, you can choose one, and there will be two concepts selected for you. Or you can do an option like this. If there are very, very few, maybe you can list the options and allow the user to select one. And this tool is a very simple tool that allows you to create this thing. So for example, you can add a title, smoking capture form, something like that. And you can say that this will be like the title, yes? And when you do that, you have the binding and you're starting your question. It's smoking, so I will, sorry, my Spanish is not good for English. Have the binding, so you can edit and things like that. And then you can add an additional one and say the smoker type, for example, and you can do with this an autocomplete, let's say, and you can create an ECL expression with the ECL builder. So you can search here and say smoker finding. And you can say, okay, give me all the descendants and self of smoker finding. Yes, and then you can say, let's add a note, choose the smoker type. And in this option, you can say if it's an autocomplete in which you type and completes a checkbox that are more than one option. Option is a single one, or a select, which is a dropdown, and we have a multiple select or a single select, or just a text box for other things. You can add the binding, and then you can start typing, and it will get the different things for you. And these are all descendants of these, of smoker finding. And you can keep creating this, like, I'm not sure. Yeah, let's do like a simple one. This is not related to smoking, but laterality. And you say, let's do, instead of doing that, let's do an options, and the ECL expression maybe is the descendants and self of side, which is the side qualifier value, or not descendants and self. Let's use just descendants, because side is not actually an acceptable value. And you select this and you add the binding, and you get right, left, and right. And this has the context there, yes. And then you can download this form, yes, and you can download and you can download as it is, as a JSON form, and you just like you see it here, and you can upload and edit there.
I think from this small demo here, so when you sit there and try to define the scope of an input field and contemplating about, well, should we be very explicit about these are the things that we would want to be able to record here, or can we use a general query? I think this playground is a good place to try and add that constraint and do a search, and have some clinicians try to do a search. Can they find what they want to find in a field like that, and do they actually find the right things? So I think it's available. So we say we'll use it in the implementation course, which we will, but it's also available to anyone who are trialing whether do we need like a broad search here? Is that sufficient? Or do we have to go in and be very specific about it's these 10 options? Because if you can design the queries and do these broad or use ECL for your constraints, it will make it a lot easier to maintain over time. Yeah.
If you're an implemental laboratory, you can sit a doctor here and look at him while he tries to enter information and capture, okay, he's struggling in this part. I should be more clear. These are too many options. You can find these ways. So you can download a JSON file and then you can upload here and keep working at a later time. So this is not saved in the tool. It's actually saved in your disk when you download. But the other option is to download this as a FHIR questionnaire. And this will allow you, this is a bit like Simplex and Major authoring tool. There is a much more professional way of doing this. This is the educational way in which we focus on the SNOMED features, yes. But for the National Library of Medicine has created this, which is a form builder, yes. This is, these are all the different FHIR tools that the Lister Hill Center has created in the National Library of Medicine. And here you have some interesting things. You have the form builder, which is similar to what we see, but completely more robust and more technical. And then you have a widget that renders the form just as it would look like in an electronic health record. And then you even have a questionnaire app, which is a smart on FHIR app that you can link from any electronic health record to test. Yes? So this is a bit of everything. But if you go to the form builder, you can create something from scratch, or you can import the local file. And let's try something risky, that is try to import what we already created. Yes, and this is what we just created, the smoking capture form. Yes, this is the title, and then you have the smoker type, and you have the laterality. And in this case, we can see how this is created based on ECLs. Yes, but you can also add more questions here. Yes, you can also add new items and keep adding new things and create a questionnaire. These questionnaires are more robust. Let me show you a more complex questionnaire. This is how it looks like. So you can select one and etc. Left, right, left, and you can type here smoke, and you can change smoker. So the same thing that we developed in this small playground, now it's a robust and FHIR questionnaire seen in this tool. But let me show you what the synoptic reporting group has been doing, trying to represent some of the cancer synoptic reporting forms. So we have something here, like this is the breast cancer one. And I will update, yes, and we'll edit the questions. There's one that has an error, so I remember that, I will remove it. This one. Remote set. Yes. Okay. This was a version that we use, and you can see that when you do it more professionally, these questionnaires can be much larger. Yes, and you have the question text. You can add some styles, and you have question codes. For example, the distance of invasive carcinoma to closest margin actually is represented by this SNOMED code, which is a concept that represents that observable. And then in this case, because it's a distance, the answer type is a choice or a value that they're trying to represent. But let's look at the first one, operative procedure. For example, operative procedure has a few options like not specified, excision, or total mastectomy. And then you can have sub-questions like types of excision. And these are the types of excision. It's a diagnostic excision, a therapeutic excision with wide margin, or a duct excision, or a re-excision even. And when you look at the advanced fields, you can include some complex conditional logic. So this question about the type of excision will only appear if the operative procedure is equal to excision. So when you see this rendered in the preview, you only see the operative procedure question. And depending on if you put not specified, you have no other questions. But if you click excision, now you see the options that we saw before.
We started with the previous form builder, and that was oriented around education and developing ideas. Can you say something about the context and the use cases for this type of form builder?
Yes, exactly. This is just, it's more, it's a professional tool that will allow you to create a fully fledged questionnaire. Of course, this is open source. You could, instead of using the National Library version, you could embed this into your own tooling in your hospital or whatever. But what you get from here is a more complex form that is completely prepared to be used in any electronic health record. So you can do this just before going to production.
Yeah, I suppose my question is, what are FHIR questionnaires typically used for?
That's a good question. Usually, we're going back to the original thing. Instead of giving a developer or an EHR vendor to say, these are the ref sets, create a questionnaire for these ref sets using your own UIs, creating the screens yourself or everything. Instead of that, I can prepare how it will look like, and completely, not only with the ref sets, because each one of these questions implies a ref set because it's a small set of options for each question, but also with all the internal logic, the nesting, the titles, the help hints, everything. And we can give that questionnaire to the software developer and say, please include that into your tool. And it's really easy for him because he will do only once the effort of being able to render questionnaires. And then we can update the questionnaire and give it again for an update, or we can create a new questionnaire for a different disease. And that simplifies this process of how do I get SNOMED into structures part of the electronic health record.
It's a good question, Kai, right? Because it's really the essence of standardization, that we try to produce something that is so close to production as possible so that we can minimize the efforts of all the providers, and they can take something that has already been invented instead of starting to invent things for themselves, because that will also make it easier when it comes to data exchange and interoperability.
Yes. And also it streamlines the update cycle, because previously if you explain the developer that you need a form in this way and they create it with their own tools, every change you need to sit down with the developer, make the requirements, explain the differences. And in this way, you can just make the changes yourself and provide that in the UI. So, we have a question. Yeah. There's an anonymous question. Can we make a section or sub-questions within the question? Yes, and it's not in the playground that we created for educational purposes. Yes, we can use titles to split things. But when you see the fully fledged editor in the National Library of Medicine, there you can create questions and nested things, and this is much more robust. Stefan says, can you combine ECL defined list with free and free text entry, whereby entry and the free text searches also available? University goes. Yes, I mean, in the options, you can either choose to use an ECL or a enumerated list of options.
There's no NLP or natural language processing supported. So if that's what's meant, that you can enter some free text and the tool will support the proposal of what SNOMED concepts to choose from, no, that is not included, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, and some of the implementations we saw, they add like an other field that if you select other, a free text appears, so you can write in free text, but it's nested inside the other one. The complex breast cancer form now being demonstrated, can it be exported as a report with a conclusion? Actually, this is interesting. The FHIR questionnaire is one resource, and the sister resource is the FHIR questionnaire response. And the FHIR questionnaire response is all the data that you enter for an instance of the questionnaire. So you create the questionnaire once, and the EHR renders the questionnaire, and then I start adding data, and all the data I enter, it's in a response. It's like a pre-filled questionnaire. And that response can even be exploded into small conditions or other small FHIR resources. Can it be exported as a report conclusion? Yeah, exactly. That's it. Good. Okay, so this was one of our first approaches. Say, okay, you can use these tools instead of creating several refs to go one step further and create a questionnaire. But then how do you manage this tool? You end up with hundreds of questionnaires or dozens of questionnaires. And how do you maintain the questionnaires updated for each new release? And what happens if you make a mistake because some of these codes are pasted here?
So we have met with several implementers where we can see, and it goes back to what I talked about earlier with the spreadsheets, and and the management of things. So it's good that you can have a control tool and a control platform like Alejandro is showing you, and you end up with these fire questionnaires. But without the maintenance features, how are you going to, over time, support the fact that now I want to use a new version of SNOMED? Now I want to apply this form, but I want to use a completely new edition because I'm in Denmark. I don't want to use the international one. I want to use the Danish one. So what do you do then with these fire questionnaire JSON files in order to be able to maintain them? That's the question here.
And because this is a separate representation from the terminology, maybe you have mistakes in the ECL, errors in the codes you enter, problems in the terms. So we created this small tool, which is a fire questionnaire terminology bindings validation tool. In this tool, you can load a questionnaire. Let's load an example, and it will scan the questionnaire and extract all the mentions of SNOMED concepts in the questionnaire. Yes, we can see that in this case, there are 137 references to SNOMED concepts.
And the important thing with this view is that it's the bindings you see. It's not the expansion of those bindings. So it's not the result of the expression constraints. It's just the bindings, because that's really what you need to evaluate on when you do an update.
Every time you reference a concept inside an ECL or directly by the concept ID, you see it here. For example, operative procedure is referenced per se. And these ones are part of an ECL. That's why you have the ECL here. And all these are extracted. And using this tool, you can click on validate. And now it's in real time checking the terminology server and seeing if the concept is real, the ID is okay, the term is present, and if it's active. For example, these ones didn't have a term before. So here is providing the term. So you can see and say, okay, it is right. It is the concept I actually wanted to refer. Or once in the bottom, this one's the term is different, for example. We put this code associated with the description N1 metastasis in 1 to 3 regional lymph nodes, and the actual term is American Joint Committee on Cancer PN1, which is different, but probably it is still correct, but the tool is alerting you that your term is different. And for inactive ones, like the one that we saw there, this in yellow, this is a valid code, but it's inactive. If it's a wrong code, you would see a red sign. You can see the replacements.
You need to show where they can see what edition they are validating against.
Exactly. This tool has a general edition selector. Do it here. So you select the server, you select the edition, and for each edition you have the version. Yes, and this is running with the latest international edition. So you can decide against which edition you're checking. Some of these may have an edition already selected and some may not. In this case, this is very similar to what Anne showed before in Snap to SNOMED. So if you were mapping to a concept and the concept is now inactive, you can get help to replacing it. And now if you're using the concept in a questionnaire and the concept is inactive, you can click here and it will fix the questionnaire for you. Yes, if you validate again, everything will be okay. And now we have the same thing. And you can go to Save Fire Questionnaire and you can download the new version. Yes, and for distribution, probably we're advising people to use a version repository like GitHub or something like that to store all the Fire questionnaires in a version way and make releases and packages to make them available. In a national extension, if they're using national questionnaires, they can include them on the release package in a resources folder, for example.
Yeah, just a concluding remark on all of this and relating to what we've said before also, that we really hope that with these small utilities, we can help implementers to move a bit away from spreadsheets. It's not because we all have to have spreadsheet allergy. It's simply to make life easier. So we understand that when you just sit down and start doing something, a spreadsheet is a good starting point, but we hope that over time, these tools will be with the features that you need locally to actually have a more robust way of managing your SNOMED CT artifacts. And now it's time for post-coordination, isn't it?
I think so. I think so. Huh? That's okay. I might ask you to do the demo at the end.
Oh.
Do you want me to share my screen so you can practice? It's on the spot. I know you've done it lots of times. So we're going to switch gears now and talk a bit about post coordination. This is our last topic that we planned, but you're welcome to ask questions at the end and see other things. I've got a written down introduction here because it's a big topic. So the idea of post coordination has been well known since the establishment of SNOMED CT, and maybe even before that. Although SNOMED CT is designed to allow new meanings to be composed, there has been a real lack of guidance on how to do this and how to do it well, and a lack of implementations demonstrating the safe and effective use of post coordination. Given that fact, the implementers of SNOMED CT are increasingly exploring the options to apply post coordination to meet specific needs. So, regardless of the fact that we don't seem to be able to find very, safe and strong use of post coordination, and there's a lack of guidance, we know that people in the field are increasingly use it, going ahead and doing what they can to post coordinate because, there's a need, it's necessary. So it's kind of become urgent. As a result, we have now published the new practical guide to post coordination, and that went out in April this year. The guide's been under development for the last couple of years, really, in the SNOMED CT Computable Languages project group. And they've been actively trying to clarify the use cases, establish the principles and the implementation advice for anyone attempting post coordination with SNOMED CT. So yeah, we encourage you, if you haven't already had a look, to take a look at this guide. It's fairly broad in scope. It introduces what is pre and post coordination, some of the concepts of the concept model and editorial guidance, which of course, do need to be followed when creating post coordinated expressions. The guide introduces the syntax and the form, the compositional grammar, the benefits and also the challenges. And unfortunately, the list of challenges around post coordination is much longer than the list of benefits. So yeah, there's plenty in there. Also goes through some of the common use cases. And after that introductory section and the theory, it goes on to talk about how expressions can be used in EHR, what the kind of workflow would be, the creation, storing and querying of those expressions. And then it goes on further, and there's a practical section at the end around terminology servers. What should it look like in a FHIR interface? What sort of API should be used? What are the requirements to actually implement this in practice? So it is a practical guide, not just a theoretical guide. I wanted to touch briefly on this brilliant diagram that was put together by Linda Bird that really puts a picture on a lot of the discussions we're having in the languages group when we talk about post coordination. There's a lot of different approaches to this topic. I'll talk about these 4 levels. So we start off down at level 0. And these different approaches vary the amount of support that you get from a terminology server. So up at level 3, you might get a lot of support from a terminology server, and the client or the user doesn't have to have a lot of experience. They could be trying to do things that are maybe like very far away from the editorial guide. But the issue up here is, although it sounds attractive, there's a lot of risk. Down here, we've got level 0, and this is where the client is doing a lot of heavy lifting. The client has to create expressions which are, very precise. They've already got correct role grouping. They adhere to the editorial guides, completely. They adhere to the MRCM, everything else. And the terminology server is doing less. It's still validating the syntax of the expression, the MRCM compliance, It's still doing classification on the post-coordinated expression, and it's hopefully providing queries on these expressions as well, but it's not doing any of the real editorial stuff. Now, what we've introduced in this version of the guide, and what we've got some clear guidance on, isn't around level 3 and level 2. They may be explored in the future, but we've identified this level 1, which is kind of one step up. This is where the client doesn't have to do so much around the modeling, and the terminology server is taking on some of the responsibility. And that happens through, we've got 7 transformations which are possible. So that allows the client to create a fairly simple post-coordinated expression that may have, one focus concept, and it may have one attribute that they're trying to, differentiate from the focus concept. For example, you might be adding laterality to a procedure. We've got the examples here on the next slide. So the idea of the transformation level 1 is that as a client or a user, you're creating the simplest type of post-coordinated expression you could. And these may not adhere to the editorial guide properly, but they kind of go into a template, and that template transforms it to a fully modeled expression. So there's some level of automation. But I guess it only works if you follow these 7 patterns. The languages group have established these patterns, and we feel that they're really common and strong use cases for post-coordination. So I guess we're trying to make it more approachable. We're trying to make it more reproducible. It should be easier to create and maintain these expressions, and we're reducing the risk while enabling people to post-coordinate with really less technical understanding, less authoring understanding, but it's still meaningful and it classifies well.
Yeah, I feel like I want to say a few words about some of the background. So we've known, as Kai was saying, we've known that post-coordination is doable. We have the compositional grammar, we have the concept model, we know what attributes can be applied to what domains and what ranges. So people can start to create these expressions, and that's good enough that you create these expressions. But the problem with post-coordination really lies in, what do you do then? When you have these expressions, how do you make them a part of processable SNOMED CT content? And that is why we have these discussions about transformations and classifying these expressions, because in order to use these expressions safely, they need to be considered as part of that substrate that it belongs to, right? That edition that it is being processed with. So creating the expressions is one thing, and it is subject to a lot of risky business, because you need to understand the MRCM and how to apply role groups correctly and everything. And that is why these transformations are important, because it helps to allow some loose expressions to be created while also transforming. But the essence is that the steps you saw there will allow your expressions to be classified in a way that you can use them and run ECL queries over them and use expressions for analytics. Because if you can't do that, you can't use expressions for anything. And that has been the dangerous part in the past, that you create expressions, but you can't really use them because you can't process them.
The likelihood is that if you create an expression and it doesn't adhere to the MRCM and it doesn't follow the editorial guide, then if you try and classify that expression, it's not going to end up where you thought it was. And essentially, your queries and your data analytics will quickly fall apart because the classification is incorrect. It's in the wrong place in the hierarchy. We've got one more slide and then we'll do a demonstration of some of this. So I wanted to say a bit about the maturity of the guide, actually. We don't have all the answers in post-coordination. The guide contains, good guidance around the risks, the approaches, some of the technical approaches as well. But it's really out for trial use and community feedback. It does have some gaps, like around how to maintain these expressions once you have them. But we do have a reference implementation. There's a beta version of Snowstorm under the Snowstorm X project, which is on GitHub. And that is complementary really to the guide. And part of this, trial for use features So you are able to create a post coordination, repository. It's called a code system supplement in the FHIR API, and you're able to. There's support for both level 0, where you have correct syntax MLCM validation, and you're already providing something that's fully modeled. And the SNOWSTORM-X will do the incremental classification. So you typically classify your post-coordinate expression within about 2 seconds and insert it into the correct place in the hierarchy. And then immediately you can use ECL to query based on either the inferred parents or the inferred attributes. But it also supports level 1. So those 7 transformations that we talked about, you can start off with what we're calling a close to user form, where they just choose, some concept, and then they add maybe just one attribute to make it more specific. And then the application will transform to a fully modeled expression with all the correct role groups based on the substrate that you're using, maybe the international edition or something else. The kind of some of the modeling is copied, and the 2 things are transformed together before classification.
While Alejandro prepares for the demo, I can just respond to Adam. You had a question earlier, and we agreed to discuss this offline as well, but that was around severity. One of the questions was around severity. So in the international edition, we don't author new concepts with the severity attribute. It's bound for a lot of ambiguity in using that attribute. So in the editorial guidance, we also state that attribute, we acknowledge that many implementers need to have the ability to specify whether something is mild, moderate, or severe, for example, but it's not something that we can model international concepts with. So Alejandro, just maybe you should show something with severity, because it is supported in expressions.
Yeah, and it's one of the level 1 transformation, severity and laterality. So this is an example of how post-coordination will look like in a clinical tool, for example. This is a small blue box. All the rest are technical stuff that is interesting for us to understand. So let's say I do something like, or let's say dyspnea. There's an H there, right? That's why. Sorry about that. This, dyspnea. That's perfect. Thank you. And here, the tool is prepared to help you do the most practical, the most reasonable post-coordination available for that concept. So based on the concept model and based on the transformations that we know, the tool is suggesting you to do if you have mild, moderate, or severe dyspnea. Yes. So let's say I do severe dyspnea, and I save this in the clinical UI. This is running in the background, something like the close to user form. It's something similar to what you see below, dyspnea, severity, this. But the necessary normal form, what is created by the classifier, has much more attributes. It has a severity, the finding site, and the interpretation. It interprets and ease of respiration observable. Yes. And the interesting thing here is that this is what previously people did in post-coordination. They just added the severity to the code, and that was all. And somehow they tried to use this in analytics later. But having this new generation of terminology servers that can actually classify post-coordination on the fly, and it's not only SNOWSTORM, onto server, B2I, they are working on running this post-coordination expressions on the fly. Now, it's like you have a new virtual concept in your terminology. So when you look at all the different types of dyspnea in your terminology, you get the classic types of dyspnea that are pre-coordinated in SNOMED, but here in yellow, you would see the one that I added, the expression, dyspnea severe. There's no description because it's just an expression, and it's creating the description based on the properties. But this is how, if you use this expression in the resource, in the problem list, or in the field in your electronic health record, then you can do queries that will capture not only the information that is pre-coordinated in SNOMED, but also will detect which are the expressions that are also subtypes, for example, of dyspnea in this case. And if we do something else, like let's say ankle sprain of ankle, yes, this is just because I typed wrong. You can see what we have more options. Yes, not only the ankle sprain can be a severe ankle sprain or a moderate ankle sprain, but also I get the laterality. And this is something that is occurring behind the scene because sprain of ankle has a site, a finding site that is the ankle, and the ankle is a concept that is a part of the lateralizable reference set in SNOMED. So we enable the option to add laterality if the finding site is lateralizable. I can say this is in the right ankle, and I can save this, and you can see the close to user form below in the expression constraint, and or something similar to the close to user form, and you can see the necessary Norman form, which is what gets out from the classifier. So this transformation is a transformation that Kai was referring to. It's very simple to maintain this.
And I think that necessary normal form, if you look at that, that is why you need a tool to do this, because you couldn't create the necessary normal form. You need the classifier to produce that, and that is what you use when you run queries. That's the necessary normal form. And there's no chance that you can create these robustly for your expressions if you want to avoid using a classifier. It's simply a no-go.
Exactly, because you need to respect all the right grouping, that the groups are done in the same way. So it's really difficult. So that's why using close to user form is so practical. So now I can do the same thing as before. Let me look at the terminology to all the kinds of sprain of ankle. Yes, and I see all the different ones that are already included in the SNOMED CT and these ones. I will show the equivalent concept, and we do it with wrist fracture. This is another way of looking at the same thing. Let's clean this up a bit so you don't see. Instead of just now typing everything, this is more a directed form that will allow you to capture some specific meaning. So for example, let's say I have a wrist fracture UI in which the traumatologist used to record that. So I say, this wrist fracture is in the distal radius and is a closed fracture with an posterior displacement, something like this. And I can save this, yes? And this is fine. And when I look at all the, I think it's not, I didn't find an equivalent here, right? No, so let's do an anterior displacement and we save. Okay, this one. The anterior, the fracture of the distal radius that is closed, has an anterior displacement, is actually a concept that already exists in SNOMED, which is the closed reverse cold fracture. Yes. And when you post coordinate, sometimes your expression matches an existing concept in SNOMED, and that's okay. So we don't allow equivalent concepts in SNOMED when we publish. But when you're using expressions, you can have expressions that are equivalent between them or expressions that are equivalent to an existing concept. So in this case, the classifier is saying, even if I use this form to enter all the necessary information, I realize that there's a pre-coordinated concept that has exactly the same meaning to this combination of attributes.
Yeah, I guess the point is that if you insert this expression into your expression repository and you get a response that says, oh, there's an equivalent pre-coordinated concept, I guess the implementer has a choice to make. They could continue and use the expression on the clinical record, or maybe it'd be more sensible to take that pre-coordinated concept and use that instead. So in this way, post-coordination is actually being used to find pre-coordinated concepts. It's like a different method.
Exactly. And the goal is always that everything that you enter here will end up appearing in your queries. As when you do an analytics query, decision support query, you will find the pre-coordinated concept and also the post-coordinated concept. We have a few other examples with odontogram, for example. You say you have an abrasion of tooth in this tooth, in this part of the surface. And you can save this and it creates an expression for you, and it will find all the different kinds of abrasion. This is when when we explained the idea of the combinatorial explosion, that SNOMED doesn't have pre-combined all the different sites for all the different diseases. You know, this is how you resolve that. Yes, people sometimes want to have combinations that are not here yet.
I'm going to pause for questions about this or anything else. There's a question online which Anna is frantically typing.
Yeah, I'm sitting here typing and typing, but it's around severity, and those of you online and the rest of you, it's because there is a problem with the pre-coordinated concepts that involve severity. They are primitive, and that means that you will be able to have, you can even create an expression with one of these where you apply a contradicting severity to it if you start to use it in an expression. So the recommendation is, this is Adam who also asked before, that you should never use these concepts that are in the released SNOMED CT edition that uses severity. It is an issue, but they are there right now. But the general recommendation is not to use them.
Severity is always in revision, because part of the problem is that some things are severe even if they don't say severe. For example, pancreatic cancer, it doesn't say severe in the name, but they're all severe. You know, cannot have a mild pancreatic cancer. So one of the approaches is to only use severe when the FSN names it, but that's not really represent all the spectrum of severe diseases in the terminology. So it's more like a terminology discussion, whether we do it or we don't do it, and sometimes we go one side or the other. It's a long, long discussion. Any other questions? Okay. No questions online. Well, thank you very much. The goal of today was to explain what we are doing and also to put us in our service. So we really, our role is to talk to you and think with you how you can do new things that you don't do today. And we get inspired by you. Many of the things that we have shown come from questions that the members and the users have done to us. So please reach out, and we are happy to discuss on all these things.
Yeah, and you can find us over the next couple of days and just reach out to us. And to all of you online, thank you very much for attending and for all your good questions. We are behind the emails if you want to reach us as well. Thank you very much.